Once upon a time in the village of Mbeer, two sisters, Adoma and Zoe, were as close as any siblings could be. They had grown up together, spent their days playing by the river, and shared their dreams under the stars. Their bond had always been strong, but now, as adults, their lives had taken different paths. Adoma, the older sister, was married to Kofi, a well-respected and prosperous man in the village. He owned fields that stretched as far as the eye could see, and their home was grand, surrounded by lush trees and fertile land. From the outside, they seemed to have everything. Yet, their house was silent, too silent. 6 years had passed since their marriage, and still Adoma had not given Kofi a child. Their home had become a place of quiet longing, a space where the absence of children's laughter was felt with every heartbeat. Zay, the younger of the two, was in a very different stage of life. She had recently given birth to her first child, a healthy baby boy named Eo. Zay's life overflowed with joy and purpose. Her days were spent caring for her son, her nights filled with the soothing rhythm of his breathing. The pride she felt as a new mother was evident in every smile, every soft word she spoke to her child. One afternoon, as the sisters walked along the narrow dirt path leading to the river, Zoe cradled Eo in her arms, humming a lullaby under her breath. The baby cooed happily, his chubby hands reaching up to touch his mother's face, as if he knew he was the center of her world. Zoe's eyes sparkled with the kind of happiness only new mothers knew, her heart full with the love she had for her son. Adoma walked beside her, trying to keep the lump in her throat from rising. She forced a smile, but it barely masked the sadness that had taken root deep in her chest. "You're so lucky, Zoe," she said quietly, her voice tinged with both admiration and longing. Zoe looked at her sister with a kind smile, unaware of the storm brewing inside Adoma. "Eo is my world," she replied, her voice filled with warmth. She kissed the top of her son's head, and the baby giggled in response, his bright eyes blinking up at her with trust and love. Adoma's smile faltered. She nodded, but her heart was heavy. "Kofi and I have been trying for so long," she murmured, her voice trembling. "But still, no child. I'm afraid. I'm afraid he's going to leave me if I don't give him a son soon." Zoe's expression softened as she stopped walking, turning to face her sister. "Adoma, don't say that. Kofi loves you. I'm sure he's just frustrated, but you two will have children. You just need to be patient. Keep praying, and the gods will hear you." Adoma's eyes welled up with tears, but she blinked them back. She had been patient for years. She had prayed to the gods, visited every healer, taken every herbal remedy anyone recommended, and still, the child she longed for had not come. And now, she could feel Kofi pulling away from her. His silences were growing longer, his words sharper. The man who had once adored her now seemed distant, and their home, which had once been filled with love and laughter, felt cold and empty. As they reached the riverbank, Zoe sat on a large stone, bouncing Eo gently on her knee. Adoma stood beside her, watching, her heart aching with a mixture of love for her sister and bitterness at her own plight. She wanted to be happy for Zoe, truly she did. But every time she saw Zoe with Eo, it was like a dagger to her heart, reminding her of everything she could not have. "Sometimes I wonder if the gods are punishing me," Adoma murmured, her voice barely audible over the gentle lapping of the river's waters. Zoe looked up, surprised. "Punishing you? For what?" Adoma shrugged, unable to meet her sister's eyes. "I don't know. Maybe for not being grateful enough, or for wanting too much. I've prayed, Zoe. I've prayed so hard. But nothing changes. The gods remain silent." Zoe reached out and took her sister's hand, squeezing it gently. "You're a good woman, Adoma. The gods know your heart. You'll have your child, I know you will. Don't lose hope." Adoma forced a smile, but the hollow ache inside her remained. She loved Zoe, But how could her sister understand the depth of her pain? How could anyone understand the quiet desperation that came with longing for something so deeply, only to see it slip further and further out of reach? That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Adoma sat in her small kitchen, preparing dinner for Kofi. The once lively home felt cold and empty, the silence oppressive. She had always taken pride in her home, in the way she cared for Kofi, but lately, the joy had drained from her life. Kofi sat outside, staring out at the fields with a distant look in his eyes. He hadn't spoken much since returning home that evening, and the tension between them had become almost unbearable. The weight of unspoken words hung in the air, filling the silence with a sense of impending doom. Adoma's heart ached as she watched him. She wished she could say something to break the silence, to ease the tension that had settled between them like a thick fog. But she didn't know how. She didn't know where to begin. After dinner, Kofi finally spoke, his voice low but steady. "We need to talk, Adoma." Her heart skipped a beat. She had known this conversation was coming. She had felt it in the growing distance between them, in the way Kofi had stopped looking at her with the same tenderness, in the way he had begun to avoid her gaze. She set her cup down, her hands trembling slightly. "What is it?" she asked, though she already knew. Kofi looked at her, his dark eyes filled with frustration, and something colder, something she hadn't seen in him before. "It's been 6 years, Adoma," he said slowly. 6 years, and still, no child. Adoma felt the familiar sting of tears, but she blinked them back, her throat tight. "I know," she whispered. "I've been trying, Kofi. You know I have." Kofi sighed heavily, rubbing a hand over his face. "I know you've tried. But how much longer can we wait? I'm not getting any younger. The village is starting to talk. The elders are wondering why we haven't produced an heir. I need a son, Adoma. An heir to carry on my name." The words cut through her like a knife. Her voice trembled as she spoke. "Please," she begged, her voice breaking. "Please don't give up on us. Give me more time. I'll go to the healer again, I'll try harder, I'll do anything. Just don't give up on us." Kofi shook his head, his expression hardening. "How much time do you expect me to wait, Adoma? How much longer can we go on like this? You know what the elders are saying. If things don't change soon, I'll have no choice but to take another wife." The room seemed to spin around her. She felt as though the ground had been ripped out from beneath her. Another wife, the thought of Kofi lying beside another woman, sharing the life they had built together, was unbearable. "I can't lose you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Kofi stood, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. He looked down at her with an expression that was more pity than love. "I'm going to bed," he said quietly. "We'll talk more in the morning." Adoma sat there, frozen in place, as the weight of his words settled over her like a suffocating blanket. Her marriage was slipping through her fingers like grains of sand, and she didn't know how to stop it. That night, Adoma lay wide awake in bed, staring up at the ceiling while Kofi slept beside her. His breathing was steady and slow, but her thoughts raced in frantic circles. Kofi's words echoed in her mind, reverberating like a cruel taunt. "If things don't change soon, I'll have no choice but to take another wife." The thought of him with another woman made her stomach churn, but no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't see a way to stop it. She had done everything, prayed to the gods, visited every healer, taken every herbal remedy she could find, and still, no child had come. As the hours dragged on, a dark thought began to creep into her mind. Zeri had a baby. A beautiful, healthy baby boy. Eo was everything Adoma had ever wanted. What if she took Eo? Adoma sat up in bed, her heart pounding. The idea was unthinkable. How could she even consider it? But once the thought took root, It refused to let go. What if she could pass Eo off as her own? What if she could make Kofi believe that they had adopted him? Zoe trusted her. The village trusted her. If something were to happen to Eo, she could tell Kofi that they had adopted a child from a distant relative, and no one would ever question it. It would save her marriage. It would give Kofi the heir he wanted. But at what cost? Over the next few days, the thought consumed Adoma. She couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, couldn't think of anything else. Every time she saw Zoe with Eo, it was like a knife twisting in her heart. She loved her sister, but the desperation gnawing at her was stronger than any bond of family. She began to plan, her mind racing with ideas of how to carry out the unthinkable. She would have to act quickly, carefully. The village was small, and rumors spread like wildfire. But if she could pull it off, if she could take Eo and pass him off as her own, she would have everything she wanted: a child, a secure marriage, and Kofi's love. The opportunity came one evening when Zoe invited Adoma to dinner. Zoe's husband was away on a hunting trip, and she needed help with Eo. Adoma saw her chance. As they sat together in Zoe's small home, eating dinner and reminiscing about their childhood, Adoma felt the weight of what she was about to do pressing down on her. Could she really go through with it? Could she really take her sister's child? When Eo fell asleep in his cradle, Zoe excused herself to fetch water from the river. Adoma watched her leave, her heart pounding in her chest. This was it. This was her moment. She stood over the cradle, looking down at Eo's peaceful face. He was so small, so innocent. How could she do this? But then she thought of Kofi's ultimatum, of the life she had built, and the thought of losing everything was too much to bear. With trembling hands, she reached down and lifted Eo from the cradle. The baby stirred slightly but didn't wake. Adoma held him close, feeling his tiny heartbeat against her chest, and for a brief moment, she allowed herself to believe that he was hers. She left Zoe's house quickly, carrying Eo through the shadows of the village until she reached her own home. She placed him in the small crib she had prepared and covered him with a soft blanket. Her heart was pounding in her chest, and her mind was racing. She had done it. She had taken Eo. The following morning, the village was awoken by Zoe's screams. She had returned to the house to find the cradle empty, Eo gone. Her cries echoed through the village as the villagers gathered, searching every corner of Mbeer for the missing child. Adoma stayed inside her home, clutching Eo tightly to her chest. Her mind was in turmoil. She had what she wanted, a son, a chance to save her marriage, but the guilt weighed heavily on her. She had betrayed her sister, stolen from her, and shattered her world. Kofi returned from the fields that evening, weary from the day's work. He saw the crib in the corner of their small home and frowned. "What's this?" he asked, his voice laced with confusion. Adoma's heart raced. She had rehearsed this conversation 1,000 times in her head, but now that the moment was here, she felt like she was about to be sick. "It's Eo," she said softly. "Our new son." Kofi stared at her, his brow furrowed. "Our son? What are you talking about?" Adoma swallowed hard, her palms sweaty. I adopted him. From a distant relative in a neighboring village. They couldn't care for him, so I brought him here." Kofi's eyes widened in surprise, and for a moment, Adoma feared he wouldn't believe her. But then his face broke into a smile, and he walked over to the crib, reaching down to pick up Eo. "A son," Kofi said, his voice filled with awe. "We have a son." For a moment, relief washed over Adoma. She had done it. She had saved her marriage. But as Kofi cradled Eo in his arms, the weight of her guilt pressed down on her, suffocating her. While Kofi celebrated the arrival of Eo, the village was consumed by Zoe's grief. She searched day and night, refusing to give up hope that her baby would be found. But as the days turned into weeks and no sign of Eo was discovered, the village elders began to counsel her that perhaps the gods had taken him. Zoe refused to accept it. How could the gods give her a child only to take him away so soon? She prayed, begged, and made offerings, but nothing brought her son back. Adoma stood by Zoe's side during the mourning period, offering comfort that rang hollow in her own ears. Every tear Zoe shed was a reminder of the betrayal Adoma had committed. But she couldn't go back now. She had made her choice. The guilt weighed heavily on her, but every time she looked at Kofi holding Eo, smiling as though all his dreams had come true, she told herself it was worth it. Kofi's joy was boundless. He doted on Eo, spending hours with him, teaching him how to walk, talk, and eventually walk the fields. "Our son will be a great man," Kofi often said, his eyes shining with pride. "He will be everything I dreamed of." Adoma watched them, her heart a mix of guilt and relief. She had saved her marriage. She had given Kofi the heir he wanted. But at what cost? The whispers in the village had grown louder. People noticed the resemblance between Eo and Zoe, and they began to question Adoma's story about adopting him from a distant relative. But no one dared confront her directly yet. As Eo grew older, the village began to notice something strange. The boy looked remarkably like Zoe, so much so that the villagers couldn't help but talk. How could an adopted child bear such a strong resemblance to Zoe's lost son? Adoma heard the whispers, felt the eyes on her whenever she walked through the market. She had thought she could keep the secret hidden forever, but now she wasn't so sure. The walls were closing in on her, and the weight of her lies was becoming unbearable. But what could she do? She couldn't confess. She couldn't give Eo back. The damage was done, and there was no going back. Zoe, still grieving the loss of her child, began to spend more time with Eo as he grew. She couldn't help but feel a strange connection to him, a bond she couldn't explain. Every time she looked at him, she saw her son, the baby she had lost. One day, while sitting with Eo during a village festival, Zoe overheard a conversation between two older women. "Look at him," one of the women said, nodding toward Eo. "He looks just like Zoe's boy would have. It's almost uncanny." Zoe froze. The resemblance had always bothered her, but she had tried to dismiss it. After all, Eo was Adoma's child now, wasn't he? But the more she looked at him, the more she couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Zoe's suspicion grew over the next few weeks. She began to notice other things, the way Adoma avoided certain questions about Eo, the way she seemed uncomfortable whenever Zoe mentioned her lost son. Finally, one evening, Zoe decided she couldn't stay silent any longer. She marched to Adoma's house, her heart pounding in her chest. "Adoma," she called, stepping into the small house without waiting for an invitation. Adoma looked up from where she was preparing dinner, her face pale. She knew why Zoe had come. She had known this day would come eventually. "Zoe," Adoma said, her voice trembling. "What brings you here?" Zoe crossed her arms over her chest, her eyes narrowing. "I need to ask you something. And I want the truth." Adoma swallowed hard, her palms sweating. "Of course. What is it?" Zoe's voice was low and trembling with emotion. "Eo is my son, isn't he?" Adoma's breath caught in her throat. She had been dreading this moment for years, and now that it was here, she felt like the world was collapsing around her. For a brief moment, she considered lying, denying everything, but the guilt was too much to bear. She couldn't keep up the lie any longer. She lowered her head, tears filling her eyes. "Yes," she whispered. "He's your son." Zoe's face twisted in shock and disbelief. "How could you? How could you take my baby and let me believe he was dead? I trusted you. You're my sister, Adoma. How could you do this to me?" Adoma fell to her knees, sobbing uncontrollably. I'm sorry, Zay. I'm so sorry. I didn't know what else to do. Kofi, he was going to leave me. I was desperate. I thought if I could give him a child, everything would be okay. Zay's hands shook as she fought to control her anger. You thought stealing my child would fix your marriage. You destroyed my life, Adoma. You stole my son and let me mourn him for years. How could you? Adoma sobbed, unable to speak. The weight of her guilt was crushing her, suffocating her. Word of the confrontation spread quickly through the village, and by the next morning, everyone knew the truth. The elders called a meeting, and Kofi was summoned to hear the news. When Kofi learned that Ayo was not their son but Zoe's stolen child, he was furious. How could you lie to me? He demanded, his voice shaking with rage. How could you let me believe that Ayo was ours, that he was adopted? How could you deceive me like this, Adoma? Adoma wept, her heart breaking. I did it for us, Kofi. I did it because I didn't want to lose you. Kofi shook his head, his eyes filled with a mixture of disbelief and anger. You didn't save our marriage, Adoma. You destroyed it. For Zay, the revelation was almost too much to bear. She had spent years mourning the loss of her child, only to find out that he had been alive all along, living under her nose. The betrayal cut deep, and Zay wasn't sure if she would ever be able to forgive Adoma. The loss of time, the years she had spent without her son, weighed heavily on her heart. She had missed so much, his first steps, his first words, his entire childhood. How do I rebuild a relationship with my son after all these years? Zay asked the village healer, tears streaming down her face. He doesn't even know me. The healer placed a comforting hand on Zoe's shoulder. The bond between a mother and child is strong, Zay. Give it time. Ayo will come to know you, and the love between you will grow. Ayo, now a young boy, was confused and hurt by the revelation. He had always known Adoma as his mother, and now, he was being told that she wasn't his real mother, that Zay was. His world had been turned upside down. Why did you lie to me? Ayo asked Adoma one evening, his voice filled with confusion and sadness. Why didn't you tell me the truth? Adoma wept, unable to look him in the eye. I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought I was protecting our family. But I was wrong, Ayo. I was wrong, and I'm so sorry. The village was in an uproar. Some people sided with Zay, condemning Adoma for her deceit and betrayal. Others, though sympathetic to Zay, understood the desperation that had driven Adoma to such extreme measures. The pain of being childless can drive people to do terrible things, one of the elders said during a village meeting. But that does not excuse what Adoma did. She has broken the sacred bond of family. The village divided itself into camps, those who supported Zay and those who believed Adoma's actions, though wrong, were understandable. After much deliberation, the village elders made their decision. Adoma would not be exiled, but she would be shunned. No one was to speak to her or associate with her. She had broken the sacred trust of family, and for that, she would pay the price. Kofi, too, made his decision. He could not live with the knowledge that the child he had raised was not his own, and that his wife had lied to him for so many years. He decided to leave Adoma, taking Ayo with him to live with Zay. Though devastated by the betrayal, Zay knew that Ayo was her son, and she wanted to rebuild the relationship that had been stolen from her. She took Ayo to live with her, determined to give him the love and care that had been taken from them both. At first, it was difficult. Ayo missed Adoma, the woman who had raised him, and he struggled to understand why everything had changed so suddenly. But Zay was patient, and slowly, they began to form a bond. I know this is confusing, Zay told Ayo one evening as they sat by the fire. But I'm your mother, and I've always loved you. I missed you so much, but now that we're together again, I'll never let you go. Eo looked up at her, his eyes full of questions. Why did Auntie Adoma take me? Zoe hesitated, unsure of how to explain the complicated emotions behind Adoma's actions. She was afraid, Eo. She did something wrong because she was afraid of losing Uncle Kofi. But that doesn't change the fact that I'm your mother. And I will always love you. Adoma was left to live in isolation, shunned by the village and abandoned by Kofi. She had lost everything, her husband, her family, and the trust of the community. She lived alone in the house that had once been filled with the sounds of laughter and love, now silent and empty. The guilt weighed heavily on her, and every day she was reminded of the consequences of her actions. She spent her days tending to her small garden, avoiding the eyes of the villagers who passed her by without a word. She knew she had no one to blame but herself. Time, as always, brought healing. Slowly but surely, Zoe and Eo's relationship grew stronger. The bond they had lost was not easily regained, but Zoe was patient, and Eo began to trust her more with each passing day. Kofi, too, came to terms with the situation. Though he could never forgive Adoma for her deceit, he found peace in knowing that Eo had been returned to his rightful family. In the end, Zoe and Eo's bond grew stronger than ever. Though they could never regain the years they had lost, they cherished the time they now had together. Eo grew into a kind and compassionate young man, and Zoe found peace in knowing that her son had been returned to her. For Adoma, life remained a quiet and lonely existence. She had acted out of love and desperation, but her actions had cost her everything. She spent her days tending to her garden, reflecting on the consequences of her choices. The story of Adoma, Zoe, and Eo became a cautionary tale in Mere Village, a reminder that no amount of desperation could justify betrayal, and that the bonds of family should never be broken. Though their journey had been filled with pain and betrayal, Zoe and Eo had found a way to heal, proving that love, in the end, could overcome even the deepest wounds. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe our African Folktales channel.